We're off. This is the great classic rock debate. I'm Kenny.
I'm Paul with 0 qualifications.
I'm Steve.
And we talk anything and everything as it pertains to classic rock. If you're watching right now, please like, comment, and subscribe. We will love you for that. We try to keep it interesting. We try to have fun. For tonight, we're going to talk rock supergroups. There have been a lot of these over the years. Some have probably left a bigger footprint than others, I suppose. But some of them have charted and had made some really great music. Others sort of disappeared. So we're going to throw out some ideas and some suggestions for perhaps who was the greatest rock supergroup. Now, I want to start with a thought here, just to sort of clarify as to what we're not looking for. You guys are probably aware that Toto, when they recorded their first album in '78, Toto was a band that was comprised of 6 really well-established studio musicians. These guys played backup for so many hit records you can't imagine. And their reputations were fantastic, but none of them had been in successful bands. They were studio musicians. So when they formed Toto, although it was a great idea on paper, for our purposes, that's not what a supergroup is. A supergroup has to have been in a band, or perhaps even solo, and established some quantity of success, not necessarily superstars, but had to have established success so that people can say, yeah, I know who that is, or I've heard of those guys, or whatever.
How many, me and Steve were kind of batting this around before we got on. How many members does that have to apply to?
Well, it should apply to all, but you know what? We're not going to enforce strict standards here tonight, and I will not kick you off the broadcast.
I appreciate that.
Yeah. So, hey, this is all subjective. We're just going to give you your thoughts, and
everybody but the keyboard player has to have been.
Yeah,
right, that's right. If the keyboard player is an unknown, I will boot you out of this chat so quick. So anyway, I'm gonna start with this, because as I Googled, now listen, over the years, this is a term that has been thrown out a lot, probably even overused a little bit. But when I Googled it to get some of those, to sort of refresh myself with some of the bands, the one that really stood out for me and that I said, wow, it never even occurred to me that those guys are a supergroup. So I'm going to start with this one, and that's Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young. Okay, guys, I never thought of them as a supergroup, but those guys all came from bands that were
the Birds, the Turtles, right?
The Birds, no, not the Turtles. That's a great. I'm impressed that you thought of the Turtles, but no. David Crosby from the Birds.
The Terrapins.
Oh, you're thinking of Herman's Hermits.
Right. Stephen Stills was with Buffalo Springfield.
Yeah,
that's right.
Yeah. And Graham Nash with the Hollies. And then Neil Young had already established himself as a solo. Plus, he was with another band, the same band that Rick James was in. He and Rick James were in a band together. I can't think of the name of that one now.
Heavy Cokeheads.
No. But I'll think of it later.
Canadians.
Doesn't matter. But anyway, and the reason that I'm choosing Crosby, Stills, Nash, Young, not only am I going to them first, but I really believe that they left the greatest mark. A lot of times supergroups would only form for 1 or 2 albums, but Crosby, Stills, Nash, we can add the Young or even without. They recorded albums over a long period and charted repeatedly.
Yeah.
And I know that at least once, and perhaps more than once in the past, we've talked about them and how, as unlikely as it may have seemed, but in 1982, they released this new album called Daylight Again. The first single released, Wasted on the Way, I thought was an okay song, but not memorable. But then the next one, Southern Cross, that is such a good song, and to me has grown over time. I think it's amazing. I really do. So those guys played at Woodstock. They recorded consistently through the 70s and scored lots of hits, even in the late 70s when it might have appeared they're starting to fade away. They come back with this song, Just a Song Before I Go, which was a big hit. And then even in the 80s. So for me, if I've got to name a classic rock supergroup who probably left the biggest mark on the genre, I'm going to go with Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young.
Steve, you want to go next?
Yeah, I would not argue that. And I had the same issue that I never considered them a super group, but they
Right.
but they are.
They
It's
are.
just funny that you don't consider them.
Yeah.
And I can't remember the name of which record, and maybe it was with Young on it. But the first cassette I ever bought, or my parents got for me, was a Crosby, Stills, Nash record, and it was had Our House on it. But I was like 5 years old, and that for whatever reason, that song really stuck with me.
It's a great song. It really
and my
is.
dad was so proud of me that I wanted Crosby, Stills, and Nash, because he's like, yes, my son likes good music at 5 years old.
He raised you right.
Yes.
Now, that song first appeared on it was a double album, and I forget the name of it, but then it appeared in the 70s on an album called So Far, which is actually sort of an anthology type of thing. So they didn't call it Greatest Hits, it was just called So Far, but it was definitely on there because I did have that album, and that is a great song.
All right. My turn, and me and Steve kind of hash this out, and Kenny's going to debate me. That's why this show is fun.
That's what makes it fun.
The greatest band of all time is a supergroup. It's called Led Zeppelin. Jimmy Page was in a band called the Yardbirds. He was the greatest guitar player in England.
Yeah.
John Paul Jones, the best bassist in England. And they went out and they got two other guys. That's why
was he also in the Yardbirds?
Who? No. Not John Paul Jones, just Page.
No.
Okay.
Page, Beck, and Clapton were all in that.
Was John Paul Jones in a band, or he just...
He was in some band.
Guy. I think he was in not Hurdy-Gurdy, but Donovan. He was like session player for
Donovan now, but he wasn't in a band per se. Like, and the other guys were in bands. Plant, and that's how when they brought Plant, he said, "I know we're looking for a drummer." He goes, "I know a guy."
Yeah, they were in a band together. That's why I'm pretty sure that they were best friends or very, very good friends growing up, at least in their teens. So.
Okay.
So,
based upon the standards that we have established for tonight's discussion, that is a great choice. Now, I think typically if you said to somebody, hey, name off some rock supergroups, I doubt if they would name that one, but I don't care. That's a good choice. That really is. And you're right. They weren't just four guys who went to high school together. I mean, most bands form a little more organically. The supergroup forms a little differently.
Right.
Guys who've established. Yeah.
Kenny, you hit the ball out of the park. They are formed for the specific reason of making a poop ton of money.
Yes.
All these bands we're going to talk about, they knew they could get together and make a crap ton of money.
Yep. Yeah.
Led Zeppelin, number one on the list. Go ahead. Your turn, Kenny. Or Steve, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, I don't disagree with Led Zeppelin, the greatest band of all time, and Supergroup, because of the fact that you can name all four musicians and members of the band, and the band does not exist without all four of those members. So I can't really argue that, even though that's not the classical definition of a supergroup. However, my greatest supergroup that's not Led Zeppelin is the Traveling Wilburys.
Okay.
And it's got two of my favorite singers, Jeff Lynne and George Harrison. And it's an example, I think, of a band that surprising. Most supergroups do not have a lot of hits, and I don't know what it is, but this is one of the few bands where if you listen to the two records, I don't think there's a bad song on any. I think the first record is stronger than the second one, which is Volume 3, but there's not a bad track on any of those two records. So,
who's the drummer?
I don't. It's not none of the. I don't think it's any of the Wilburys. I think it's just. I think they had a session player, but I could be mistaken.
Possible.
Because if you look at the videos, they're all playing. They all play guitar.
Right. That's what they sing. So someone's playing bass. I don't know, and I'm not trying to. I'm just saying I just don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. I'd have to look at the liner notes, but I don't think any one of them. Maybe Jeff Lynne played drums on it for all I know. He played a lot of instruments, but yeah, I don't. That's a great question.
Kenny, I think it's your turn.
Yeah. Let me just add real quick that in my Googling, Traveling Wilburys came up more than any other name. That was the one that got named repeatedly in discussion forums. And they really employed the idea. It's almost like somebody said, hey, let's make a supergroup, but we've got to stick to this particular standard. There can be no unknowns, you know?
Yeah.
Everybody has to be like a star. So they really...
That has to be the biggest supergroup that was formed with kind of the biggest musicians that I can think. I can't think of a more distinguished group of solo artists who came together.
Totally agree. Yeah, totally agree. And when you think of, well, Jeff Lynne alone, and I don't know who else would have been doing any of the production work there, but Jeff Lynne, just by himself, that guy crafted more hit songs, you know, not just for ELO, but for other bands too. So if you got a guy like that in your band, and especially if you got him at the production boards, you know, there's guaranteed hit songs. So yeah, good choice. Okay, so I'm going to go next. Okay, so I'm going to first name one that, even though it came up, I don't think of this, and you guys can tell me if you disagree, I don't think of this as a supergroup. It's almost like CSNY. CSNY, I think of these guys as a group, but it's Emerson, Lake and Palmer. All right. Now, here's the thing. One of them was from King Crimson. I think that might have been Emerson. I'm not sure. It could have been Blake. Who classic rock doesn't really play them, but they had some records there in the early 70s.
Yeah.
Some pretty good rock records.
Yeah.
But the other two bands, and I've heard of them. One of them is The Nice. And by the way, that was Jeff Lynne's pre-ELO band, The Nice. But they're probably known well in the UK, but not here in the States. And then the other band was called Atomic Rooster. And again, they had some pretty heavy, hard rock material, but nothing that you would ever hear on a classic rock station to this day. So whether or not that they qualify as a super group, I'm a little bit reluctant to count them.
They didn't have a lot of hits. They had that song that was 12 minutes long all the time.
There was Lucky Man.
Lucky Man is the song that they're probably best known for.
Welcome to the circus, my friend.
That one is called. I don't care for that one, if I'm being honest.
I don't either.
They used it on TV commercials. Welcome, my friends, to the show that never ends, or whatever. Yeah, I find it annoying.
I do too, and it sounds like a Who song too.
Yeah, I agree. I totally agree. Okay. All right. So here's what I'm going to go with next, and this is what inspired me. Today, I'm driving home from work, and I'm saying to myself, I really haven't had any good ideas lately for topics that we can just take it and run with it. And right about that time, a song comes on the radio, and I go, perfect. The song was Hunger Strike by Temple of the Dog, okay? Yeah. Now, I realize it was a one-time only album, and I think it was like, weren't they doing a fundraiser for somebody who was in bad health
anymore?
It was, and I thought that it came out really before both of those groups kind of took off.
It did.
You're right. It did. And I think, and you know, the song Hunger Strike, which obviously is still getting played on the radio because I heard it today. I don't think that it was really getting a lot of airplay until after Soundgarden. And I think that some radio DJ said, hey, you know what? Let's start playing this song. And it is a good song. It really is. And, you know, once you find out who's in the band, you can understand why. So I don't think they had a lot of other hits other than.
That album is tremendous, by the way.
Is it really? Is it?
So when you say hits, it's like you and I had this discussion about Thin Lizzy. They have about 25 really good songs.
Right. Yeah.
So that album is tremendous.
Okay. So we always get into this. It's sort of a fuzzy area where what do you hear? What are you going to continue to hear on the radio by them? But how much amazing material did they make that unfortunately radio ignored? You know,
right?
So we don't want to neglect either one of those as we're trying to to do our
It
calculus.
just shows
here.
the radio should be killed and shot. Anyway.
Yeah, radio, and especially as it has become more corporate over the years, has let us down again and again. And so many times on this show, you've heard me say, it is criminal that this song was never played, you know. So anyway, but there's my choice, Temple of the Dog.
All right. I'm going to go. None of us have said Asia. We'll get to that. It's one of us going to do, but I'm not going with them. I'm going to go with Velvet Revolver.
Okay.
So you had Guns N' Roses merging with Stone Temple Pilots, Scott
Yes.
Weiland. They had two really good albums.
Yes.
I think they're really good. Steve, I don't know if you like them a lot, but I really like that. Especially the second album is tremendous.
No, it is. But I don't find it as nearly as good as GNR or Stone Temple Pilots. They have a couple, I think, of really good songs. But
you're setting a very high bar there. So just
good point, Kenny.
Yeah.
And you guys know me. I love GNR, one of my favorite bands. But I was kind of disappointed. I think I expected too much because the bar had been set so high. Now they have some really good songs, but I think there's a lot of filler in there as well.
The second album is way better, in my humble opinion, than the first album. But
and they do. Is it on the second one? They do cover an ELO song. Can't get it out of my head.
Really?
That must be the first album.
Yeah, and it's a really good cover. I just can't remember which album that's on.
It's the first one.
Okay,
Libertad,
it's a great track.
No, Contraband or Libertad. I can't remember which one is which.
Yeah, I can't remember.
That was mine.
Okay.
Well, here, let me just add my thought really quick. And you know, just a few weeks ago, I mentioned on this show, it is a crying shame. I mean, so now classic rock has now shifted into their more modernized. They're not playing to the old farts like me anymore. I guess they're playing to the guys in their 30s and 40s, and they're playing all kinds of songs. My Own Worst Enemy. I want to shoot myself every time they play that. Oh, I forgot to tell you guys, there's another one. Flagpole Sitta. It's just Harvey Danger, I think, is the name of the band. It's another song that has no business being on classic rock, but they play it, and they play it all the time. But they don't play Fall to Pieces. And I say to myself, how is it possible that you guys are calling yourselves a rock station, much less a classic rock station? It's now 20 years since that album was released. There's no artificial barrier that's preventing you from playing Velvet Revolver, Fall to Pieces, and they don't play it.
Yeah, I don't know if I've ever heard Velvet Revolver on the radio, even 20 years ago.
You're probably right.
Now, Slither,
Slither, yes.
plays that live, and man, that is an awesome.
That's a great song
live.
Like I think I told you guys, I saw them at. I got to meet the band. Who cares? But then they were really cool. But they played Interstate Love Song, and I was like, Slash is playing the was it Robert DeLeo or Dean DeLeo playing it, and it's the same notes, but a different style. It just spellbound me. It was incredible.
Yeah, it is. I love that because it is. You're like, it's got a different guitar, different amp, different setup, and you can just hear the tone. As soon as you hear Slash play one note, you're like, that's Slash. I mean, it's just those great guitar players have that. They have that tone.
Yep, and it's great singers too. Like you just hear, okay, right away. You know, David Lee Roth. Like you're here. Okay, all right. Next, who's next?
I think it's me.
I think it's.
It's Steve.
Go ahead. So I'm going to take us back to the 90s. And Paul, this is an honor of you, but Down, which Kenny, you may not be familiar with, but Down is a supergroup formed from Pantera, Phil Anselmo, and Rex Brown, the lead singer and the bass player.
The bass player was the guy from Crowbar.
Oh, that's right, Crowbar, the drummer. But that's right. Rex Brown was in the follow-up, Hell Yeah, which was another supergroup with Vinnie Paul. But yeah, Down is actually, I think Down, their best is better than the highest of Pantera and the highest of Corrosion of Conformity, in my opinion. But Pepper is on at his A game, and so is Phil at the top of especially that first record.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. I'm with you there, buddy. Down I saw them like 3 or 4 times. Love it. That's not Kenny's wheelhouse, unfortunately.
Yeah, it's not Kenny's wheelhouse, so it's okay. Okay, their first record was NOLA because they're out of
New Orleans,
Louisiana, but it's a really kind of heavy blues based metal. I think if you're not into like really heavy metal, you might like this because it's got a lot of blues, got some melody to it, but a lot of blues based metal. So.
Definitely some drop D tuning. It's tuned way down. Like anyway, it's all right. Who's up, Kenny?
I think it's me. Okay, so I'm going to go with. I know that you guys probably really like this band. I know I do. And they're just approximately 10 years old. It would be Black Country Communion.
There you go.
All right, so I got to tell you, for me, they just sort of came out of nowhere. I didn't see this coming at all. I knew who these guys were, especially Glenn Hughes, especially Joe Bonamassa. I think there's one member who I'm less familiar with. Jason Bonham's the drummer.
Jason Bonham.
Derek Sherinian is the keyboardist who was actually with Dream Theater. And, those guys never hit really big, but they've got some pretty good songs. They have a lot of those 15-minute songs that radio is never going to play,
Yeah.
But I think they're pretty good. Anyway, so these guys come out of nowhere. They released this album, and my God, the first single, now I don't remember what it was.
One Last Soul?
One Last Soul. I hear it, and it takes one listen for me to go, oh, I'm going to get that right now. Yeah, that is really good. And I can't say enough about Joe Bonamassa as a guitarist.
Yeah.
He is utterly fantastic. He really is. And unfortunately, unless you really follow guitarists, you're not going to know who he is. But man, that guy's good.
No,
go ahead, Steve.
I was gonna say I worship Joe Bonamassa. I think he's my age, and I just look at it. I'm like,
yeah,
I've been playing guitar for maybe only a few years less than Joe Bonamassa.
Right.
It's just further proof that you're kind of born with this. But this my favorite track off that record is "Song of Yesterday." It's like an epic track.
Yes. I think
that's their best work.
I should have added that. They have such a nice mix of the shorter songs, but then they add those epic 7 or 8 minute songs, and they're so good and so well produced and bluesy. And man, it's just good stuff. It really is. In a way, it's almost like a throwback.
It is. And I got to tip my hat to Paul because he introduced me to them. So.
Oh wow, awesome.
So thank you. And he introduced me to that, and I think Wolf Mother maybe at the same time.
Well. I got on that metal show. Steve and I have a friend who's a big shot at Viacom. So he got me on the metal show. And then after one of the episodes, I got to hang out with Glenn Hughes. He's like the coolest guy. And he plays bass and he can hit these really high notes.
Oh, his voice.
Sabbath.
He's within the universe of rock vocalists. He's at the peak of the mountain. He's amazing.
He's the nicest man you ever want to meet. And so is Jason Bonham.
Wow.
Like I talked to him. He played. His band was called Bonham. And they opened for the Cult. So I talked to him about that show. And he goes, "Where was that show?" West Palm Beach Auditorium. He goes, "What year was that?" Like he has no knowledge. I told him. He goes, "Oh, that's ringing a bell a little bit."
Probably 89, something like
90,
that.
Yeah. So he was. I think he was been drinking and
yeah.
And I started telling him about it. He started laughing. He goes, "Now I heard that because Steve, the little crap hole place in West Palm Beach, it looks like a teepee, and it rained when it leaked, so they call it the leaky teepee."
Right.
And so anyway,
Jason Bonham was drinking, like father, like son.
Right.
Yeah. All right.
And that's not a crack at either one of them. So just see.
No, I love them. Glenn Hughes is the greatest guy. So is Jason Bonham.
Okay. Anyway, that's mine. Black Country Communion. Who's up? Steve? Paul.
All right. I'll just say for Asia. So it had John Wetton singing. I forgot what band he was in.
He was in the Buggles, I think.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because remember that whole thing where they came along and they destroyed the band Yes, and then Steve Howell, was it the guitar player, joined them?
Correct.
And then Carl Palmer was the drummer. I don't know who the bass player was. I can't remember anymore. It was also somebody, a big shot. And that first album, I haven't listened to that album in probably 25 years.
I haven't either.
Heat of the Moment. That's a good song, but it's like it's a little.
Let me just tell you, Paul, real quick, because I was 21 at the time that album was released. I heard Heat of the Moment on the radio, and I went and bought the record right away. Okay. And, back in those days, what we did was we taped both sides onto a 45-minute cassette. You could take up a full side, and that way you didn't have to wear out the record, so you play it. And I played it. I played it 100 times or more. I played it so many times. And I really thought this is a great album and so many good songs on there. Now, this is one of those that with the passage of time, I feel differently about, okay? I feel like it kind of lost its luster. Even Heat of the Moment sounds more like a pop song now than it does a rock song, you know? Yeah. And interestingly enough, those guys, Asia, they might still be recording to this day. I know that they recorded for 25 or 30 years, but the personnel changes, impossible to keep up with. I doubt if probably within 10 years, they had none of the original members.
Kenny, that's what they call them, Asia Minor.
They're big in Japan.
Right. So I know that by the second or third album, Greg Lake had taken over the vocals. So I think John Wetton was gone by that time, and I downloaded some of their 90s material, and it was surprisingly good. It was way more proggy than the early stuff, way more progressive, but it was good. It was really good. So I feel like they're a good band who probably has made a lot of years of good music, but that album that launched them in '82, which went to #1 and sold millions of copies or whatever, I just feel like it lost some of its luster, and it's not so much of it was a great rock album in 1982. Nowadays it's not, maybe.
Yeah. I got to go back and listen to it, and maybe I'll go back and
it's okay. I'm not going to beat on it, but it's okay.
All right, who's next?
Steve.
Me.
Oh, we got our warning, fellas. So we have to. Yeah.
Go ahead,
so
Steve.
Audio Slave.
Oh, good choice.
Which is amazing because it could have been very easily just been Rage Against the Machine with Chris Cornell as the lead singer, but interesting enough, it didn't really sound like either of the it didn't sound like Soundgarden. It didn't sound like Rage Against the Machine. It had its own kind of unique sound, and I don't know. I mean, Tom Morello, I love him as a guitar player. I'll just preface it with that. I'm not ready to join the revolution that he's on, but the guitar playing sounds different than Rage Against the Machine.
It does.
And then with Chris Cornell singing, it doesn't sound like Soundgarden. So it's just a weird group, but they put out a lot of really good songs, which was surprising because I think most supergroups are not successful. They don't put out a lot of hits. But I can't think of a bad track on any of I think they put out 3 records.
I can tell you right now that I'm hearing consistently 2 Audio Slave songs on the classic rock station, Like a Stone, and I think I Am the Highway is the other one.
Yeah, those are I think off the first their first record.
Yeah, really good songs.
But I would encourage you to go listen to, I think it's their 3rd record, is Mothman or Moth. I think it's the Mothman or Moth. It is, or Flaming Moth, something like that. That might be their best. I think it might be the last track on that record, but it's probably their best song that they ever put out.
All right. Okay, I'm up.
Yeah, go ahead.
We'll each do one more, but we got to move kind of quick. Okay, now this one is going to be an interesting option. Paul, I think that you're going to approve. My choice is The Power Station.
There you go.
The Power Station. 2 members of Duran Duran, Robert Palmer, and then the drummer from Chic, Tony Thompson. Yeah, exactly. And listen, in 1985, that song, Some Like It Hot, was as good as any song that you would hear on the radio. It was all over the place. It was on the pop stations. It was on the rock stations. It was on MTV. It was everywhere. And I never got tired of it. It was great. Now, as an interesting little anecdote, Paul emailed me one day years ago and said, "Hey, do you have the song Harvest for the World by the Power Station?" And I went, "That's the Isley Brothers." You know? So I emailed him the song, and then I said, "You know that this was done originally by the Isley Brothers?" And he's like, "Nope." So anyway, yeah, interesting little story. But the Power Station, short-lived, I think they had 2 albums maybe.
Yeah.
But man, they hit it hard and left their mark. So I really like it.
Did you like that version? I love Robert Palmer's version of it.
Dude, when I heard it, I couldn't believe how good it was, because I'm a huge Isley Brothers fan, and most Isley Brothers songs, when someone else attempts to create it, it's like that was a mistake. It just you're gonna come up short. Robert Palmer's version was excellent, really, really good.
Yeah, I was blown away, and that drumming, it was like, why couldn't they? It was weird. It's
right.
No, I worship Robert Palmer, as I've said a few times before on this show.
Yeah, he's badass. And those videos he made after,
yeah.
Even if I watch them now, I just can't stop looking at it. I don't know if it's because of the girls or like.
Yeah.
And then he goes, "Hey, if one is good, more is better."
Right. Right. Okay.
I think
Paul,
I'm out of
you're
material.
up.
I don't know another supergroup. I don't think.
Okay. All right. Don't worry about it. We're out of time.
I got one. It's not rock related. It's country.
Okay.
It says we're out of time. The Highwaymen.
Oh yeah.
Johnny Cash, Willie Nelson,
there you go.
William Jennings, Chris Christopherson.
Right.
I mean, those are men right there. And
if you're looking at country music from sort of a legacy standard, you're not going to get 4 bigger names than that.
Yeah, and we don't talk country on this channel, and I'm not a big fan, but I do like these guys, the outlaw country, and I do listen to these guys.
They had a lot of rock elements in their music. They did.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, fellas, that's going to be a wrap. Any final or closing thoughts here before we say goodnight?
It's amazing, just the ego thing. And the other thing we didn't get to tonight was, like, I talked about Parliament, Kenny.
Yeah.
How George Clinton was in both, and I don't remember the story about how he was able to have 2 separate bands, but he in both bands. I don't know how that works, and how they let, when Soundgarden broke up and Chris Cornell went to this, I don't know how that works. It's just very interesting.
Yeah.
And which is probably why Cream broke up. So we didn't mention them, but I think they had a lot of egos that were butting heads. So
probably. Hey, I want to add one final thought, completely off topic, but I just saw this 2 or 3 days ago. I saw it on YouTube by accident, and it's a remake. We mentioned Joe Bonamassa earlier. He's playing guitar, and the lead singer from Train. Actually, I think their whole band is playing, but they're doing a cover of "Hold On Loosely." Okay, and it's worth hearing. They're not really doing anything amazing with it, whatever, but for people who like that song, they inject a bolt of energy into it, and I thought it was pretty good. So if you're not doing anything, pull it up on YouTube. Train with Joe doing "Hold On Loosely," the original 38 Special song.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah, it's pretty good. You're gonna like it.
Whatever you do, don't let go.
Okay, we're out of time. That's it. So for now, we are the Great Classic Rock Debate. I'm Kenny.
I'm Paul.
I'm Steve.
If you're watching, please like, comment, and subscribe. We will love you for that. Until we meet again, we'll see you next time.